March the 20th, and we are counting down to the final hours of winter 21-22 as spring officially arrives today at 11:33 a.m. Hey, good morning to everybody. Those that are watching me for the first time, my name is Frank Ferragini, aka Frankie Flowers of City TV's Breakfast Television and, of course, City Line. I'm a four-time best-selling garden author, four-time recipient as well of Landscape Ontario's Garden Communicator of the Year. I've designed a couple award-winning gardens as well. I'm passionate about plants, wild about weather each and every day. On Breakfast Television, you can see me forecast the weather, but as well give you some tips and tricks in the worlds of gardening. My passion, as I said, is plants. The reason that passion is really a product of me being with my family, and I always joke about child labor, but my family has two garden centers, one in Bradford, one in Barrie. They're both called Bradford Greenhouses Garden Gallery as well. We are greenhouse growers, and I come here each and every Sunday morning from 9 to 9:30 to answer your garden questions and get you inspired about the world of gardening. Last week, if you're wondering, where the heck was Frankie? Well, Frankie went on a little trip. As a matter of fact, I went on a little trip with my two boys to Mexico. I'll share you some of those pictures right now. We might as well do that right away. We'll go to a little Chrome tab here and we'll go boom and we'll go share. So indeed, yeah, we went and traveled to Mexico just to Playa del Carmen. We had a great time. This resort that we were at was one that's known for its plantations. It's actually called the Grand Velas in Playa del Carmen. This was the Zen, a little resort area, which you can see is put in the jungle with lots of tropical plantations. You can see even the crown of thorns that are there as you looked into the pool. Some beautiful, beautiful plants overall that you could just kind of take in, enjoy, walk around. And I'm always amazed by just different plant material at different places I go towards. And there's a look. You can see the bougainvillea aligning every one of their decks. And it was just such a nice time, even some outdoor beach time as well. And for those that are wondering, hey, Frankie, what was it like to travel? That's kind of the question that people are having right now. It was chaotic. Pearson it was March break. I actually departed 2 days before the start of March break. We were delayed 2 hours flying out. The reason being is they forgot to pump the plane's septic system. What the heck? But it was chaotic. But actually, everybody was following protocols. It at times felt a little bit uncomfortable. But when you were there, I think travel is something where memories are created and there's lots of lessons that you can learn about culture as well. We did a little bit of a tour, an eco tour, and learned a little bit about the Mayan culture that was there. We actually went to another place called Explore and saw some of the beautiful different caves that they have in that area. So overall, it was really good. So let's go right to some questions right now because we're getting lots. Good morning from Newmarket. Love your show, says Susan. This is from Jacqueline. What can I plant what can I plant in the ground that won't eat and dig? So this question here, I'll show you this question. I don't really know what you're saying right there, but there are a bunch of different plants that are out there that will avoid anything from eating or digging. And the number one indication of a plant that will protect itself from that happening is anything with a thorn. Remember that plants that have thorns on them generally are there as protection against animals. That's the reason why that plant put that thorn on there. So take a look at those, and I can find out what is specifically. I know that in my backyard, for instance, this year, I was amazed with the amount of rabbit dung poo that I had in my backyard. I saw rabbits, but I didn't think there was that many. I did have a little bit of some damage on some of my hydrangeas that I had in the back, but it was just minimal damage overall. That was just them when they were running out of their food source, trying to look for something to eat. But most of the items that I planted in my backyard, I planted that were rabbit repellent. The reason being is that many areas in the province of Ontario, and I know right across the country, have a lot of rabbits in suburbia. And a lot of that time we got to plant against them or prepare for them. That's why in the fall, sometimes you'll even put a little plastic wrap around the base of some fruit trees to prevent rabbits from chewing the base of that fruit tree and damaging that fruit tree. So there's different things that we can do. What do we got here? Good morning, Frankie from Gravenhurst. Glad you had a great time away. Good morning from Scarborough. Good morning from Barbados watching us this morning. Happy spring as well from Mary Manley, that is. Here's another one this morning. This is from Sharon. Good morning from Peterborough. Miss Mexico this year. Beautiful country, beautiful people. Indeed. Okay, let's talk a little bit about spring as well. So spring is going to arrive at 11:33 a.m. this morning. Even though that's the spring equinox, which is pretty exciting, right? We can all then say, hey, we are in spring, which is a sign that we have an improvement in weather, but it doesn't mean that winter weather will go away. I actually had a friend yesterday contact me because of the warm weather and said, when can I plant some plants outdoors for some color? It's way too early still. Even at the end of March, sometimes we can get away maybe the first week of April with planting some pansies, osteospermum, some cold hardy plants, even some dianthus. But right now, I'm with certainty knowing that we're going to see temperatures dip below -5 a few nights. We still have that as a possibility in the forecast, at least in Southern Ontario. We could still see some snow. So if you're ambitious right now, it's the time to go to the backyard to inspect that property. Take a look where you've seen any damage from rodents, like rabbit damage, maybe even mole tunnels. Start developing a plan, cleaning up. Right, you can remove some leaves. You can actually pick up some dog poo if you have a dog. So there's lots of things that you can do at this time. Seed starting right now, you should get really going and growing, because now's the time that tomatoes and peppers should be there. You can start to think about doing some cabbage and cauliflower at this time as well. So you can start to really ramp up your indoor seed starting. And a reminder, if you're like, wow, maybe I should do that this year. If you're new to gardening and you're watching this just to kind of incorporate yourself to gardening, I would suggest for the first year to plant some transplant, but also do some direct seed sowing. And what that means, direct seed sowing, is once temperatures warm up outdoors, then what we can do is start to directly plant seeds directly into the garden. Some of the easy things that you can do like that are radish and spinach. You'll get the whole idea of seed starting, the whole process of it. It's much easier to do it outdoors. You could also do things like some of the morning glories. You can do those easily by seeds. Some sweet peas, if you're thinking about it. Even sunflowers. You could do a direct sow on a sunflower. But those are some things that you can do. Here we go as well. We have another good morning from the Enchanted Princesses on a wonderful cruise. It's kind of neat that everybody, because now we're in this world of the internet, the interweb, is that people can join us from all over. And you can see that people are really jumping on and traveling again, which is, sorry, great. I just had to get a little bit of coffee in there. It's great. I'm excited. It's so great to get out there travel. You can see different gardens. You can actually learn different things, eat different foods, do different culture, right? Experience and meet different people. It's all fantastic. I'm a little bit worried. That over the last 2 years, that people stayed home and they really tended, expanded their gardens, did more gardens, more planting. I just hope that for this year, people continue to embrace the garden, and actually people are continuing to maintain the garden and to continue to build on the skills and the journeys that they've learned. If you are traveling, there's different strategies that I'm going to help you along the way. That you can make sure that your plant material looks good when you come home. Even your indoor plants look good. I actually had one really dry peace lily when I came home, and I had to cut off a few leaves because those leaves looked like they were a little bit damaged overall. But that is my hope overall. Here we go. And here's a question, I think. This is from Madeline Yi Lee. Just moved to a new house and too impatient to see what's going to pop out. So it's true, right? If you're into a new home, the first thing that you want to do, and this is what I would suggest, is to, number one, once things start to grow, is to learn what you have in that new home, that new landscape. So do a little bit of research. There are some apps. There's actually some apps that you can just take pictures of those plants and they'll actually identify. I have to look up those apps again, but I think one's actually just called Plant ID. But those some apps that you can start to develop and know what plants you have in your garden. A couple of things that'll make you knowledgeable about is, some of them will, when to prune. Some of them you'll need to know if you have a small dog, if some of them are poisonous. Just a great way. And then you can actually start to evolve and maybe think about when you're driving through other areas in your residential location. If you're seeing certain things that are blooming at certain times and you just adore and love those, then maybe you want to incorporate those into the landscape. Coming up, just speaking about incorporating things in the landscape. Coming up on, I believe it's April the 9th. It's the April the 9th at 11 a.m. I will be at the Cottage Life Show. It's my first public appearance since the beginning of the pandemic. Actually, no, I did one public appearance in Oakville, but I did that at a mall. But this is my first real larger public appearance. I'm going to be talking about plants that you can leave alone. So it's basically plants that you can leave at the cottage that will take care of themselves or are fairly low maintenance, or plants that you can have in your home landscape that if you are going to your cottage and or traveling, there are easy ones that you can take care of. And those are ones that have disease, insect resistant, a bloom period, good garden interest. And really, if you're using those plants for up at the cottage, making sure you're planting things that are in color or in full glory when you're up there enjoying the cottage. So I'm impatient for you too, by the way. There's Sue that's saying good morning as well. Good morning to you. We got another happy first day of spring from Ashley. Good morning to you as well. We have Andrea Blanket Atkinson. Welcome home. My snowdrops are up. Snowdrops are a wonderful, wonderful flowering bulb. Early spring flowering bulb. And the reason why they call them snowdrops is immediately as soon as the snow melts, they start to appear. And they're a wonderful little white blooming thing. And they're absolutely fantastic. One of the first signs of spring. I want to show you a sign of spring as well that was sent to me. I'm just going to share my screen here as well. So we're going to go over here. It just takes me a second. And we're going to go over to, and I'm going to share this to you. So this was an email sent to me from one of the viewers that watch and one of our friends to Frankie Flowers. This is what you're seeing here in the center is a white-headed robin. That is pretty cool. Just take that in for a second as I take another sip of coffee here. White-headed robin. Robins are always, of course, a sign of spring, but the whole thing is that, white-headed robins. Who thought there was such a thing as a white-headed robin? So I'm going to share something else with you as well. So we're going to go here and go over and learn a little bit about the white-headed robin. And boom. This is a really neat page, by the way. If you're ever looking for birds or you want to report on some different birds that are interesting you don't know about, this is Cornell. This is the Cornell lab. This here is called Project Feeder Watch. And as we can take a look, there is, of course, a thing called the white-headed robin. They are spotted all over the place. If we look down here, we see that they've been spotted in Providence, Rhode Island, West Virginia, Delaware River. As I went through here, I even found a couple from in Ontario, Chelsea, and New York City. You can see. So some of the things that surprise us in our gardens, we never really thought that we'd ever see something like that. But there's something that you probably didn't know, or maybe you do know, a white-headed robin. So look out and search for that white-headed robin spotted in Newmarket. But robin's indeed a sign of spring overall. And happy first day of spring to you. So we're just going to go great. Glad you had a great holiday. That there was from Catherine. Paul is saying educational. Here we go. This is the question that we have. This is from Jacqueline again. What can I plant that groundhogs won't eat or dig up? So there are different things that groundhogs will avoid, but often depending, like they're always going to eat leafy greens. They're going to eat anything they're going to always go towards anything that's the softest growth first. Sometimes what we will have to do is if this is a common and reoccurring problem, you either have to trap and relocate that groundhog, or you have to build some sort of a barrier and or fence around the area, but that fence needs to be dug down. The other thing that you can do is you can actually get some coyote urine. You can buy that at your sporting goods stores and kind of put those droplets around. You can use something that's called Animal BB Gone and spray it on the plant material while it's growing. That has a flavor of Bitrix on it, and that will allow that groundhog not to like the taste and or flavor and to move into some other areas. So there's some tips for you as well. There are groundhog traps that are available, and you can actually call any of your local wildlife companies that actually do wildlife management, and they'll trap and relocate that guy for you. There's Sandra saying, I think she means groundhogs. Here we go. This is from Lucy, GM from London. It really is it really okay to plant pansies out already? So pansies, is it okay? What'll happen to a pansy is if we get some colder temperatures, if we're about -1, -2, you may just get some bloom drop and then they'll rebloom again. But if we go down to -5, you'll actually get some frost damage on the leaf of the pansy. And it all depends on how that pansy and or viola was grown. If it was grown cold by the greenhouse grower and means that it was grown so it actually had a really cold night, no heat, put into a cold frame so that they're really quite hardy overall, then that's a better one that's put out. And you can actually you can tell by the deeper kind of texture of that green leaf of the pansy, it's a little bit thicker. But if you see that pansy and or viola that you're looking to purchase and it's really soft, lush green, it means that it was grown a little bit more warm. I wouldn't feel comfortable planting pansies in London right now. We are at the 20th of March. I'd still wait till the first week of April at the earliest, more so to the middle of April. And then you can enjoy those guys all the way through to the beginning of June to the middle of June and then replant at that time. So there you go. Here we go. Good morning from Hamilton. This is from Patricia. I have a clematis and I wonder when is the best time to prune it, fall or spring. So it all depends. There's many different clematis or clematis. It all depends on when they're blooming. If it's a spring blooming or early summer blooming clematis, I would wait for it to all leaf out and just prune off any dead wood that's there. If it is a late, like let's say that it's blooming into late June, July and beyond, that blooms on new wood. So you can prune it even if you wanted to go out and do some selective pruning right now to shape it. And then once it leaves out, prune off any dead wood, you'd be good. So it all depends. Remember that clematis or clematis are plants that like alkaline soil. So if it's not been performing that well for you in the past, putting a little bit of dolmatic or horticultural lime down is very helpful. Shading its root system is really good, important too. So you either put some plants in front of it or put some mulch around the base of it because it likes the sunny top, but a cool shaded bottom. That's the clematis for you. Good morning. Here we go with the question. We have a vole eating grubs. Too soon to put down grub be gone? Can we put down Scott's lawn food yet? So indeed, it is too soon for both. Number one, too soon for grub be gone because those grubs are a little bit deeper down into the surface. We want the soil temperatures to warm up so they actually come a little bit higher. And even though you're seeing some of that damage that's happening, what you can do now just to repel or try to encourage those voles and or moles to go somewhere else is apply a little bit of blood meal on dry days down. That blood meal will actually discourage them to go elsewhere. Once we start to see things actively growing, so we start to see some leaves start to crack on some of the trees, or we start to see some buds appear, that's when we can then apply some of the Scott's Turf Builder and or any lawn food down, because that's when the plants are starting to actively grow. They're sitting pretty dormant right now. The ground itself is still frozen, so it's not going to absorb any of that nutrient. And there's also a greater chance that you could have a little bit of runoff. Miracle Grow is a slow release fertilizer, and it's actually formulated so that when we have ground with no ground frost, that there will be no or minimal runoff at all. So then that way it's more environmentally friendly, and it's actually been formulated with the environment in mind. But it's too cold right now. We have still ground frost that's out there and a little bit too early to do that. I need another drink. Here we go. Happy Sunday, first day of spring. That's for Connie. Here we go again. Good morning from Toronto. Wondering, this is from Helena, wondering if there are any tips on how to grow many vegetables from a small garden, approximately 7 by 15. What veggies grow well together? Thanks. So my book, Food to Grow, has actually got a lot of different information on growing food in the smaller space by that. 7 by 15 feet is actually a lot of space. The one thing that you want to look at is, number one, before you try to think about what can we grow, what do you eat? So what are some things that you eat? And let's see that they fit in those space. The other thing that we want to really kind of plan out is succession planting. What succession planting means is, let's say that you're planting some smaller tomato plants in that space, and they need to go in the sunniest space of that space. They're pretty small in the beginning. So what you would do is you would then plant some lettuce plants around those tomato plants, and then you could actually harvest the lettuce, leaf lettuce or red leaf or Boston, before that tomato is going to take that space. So you can actually maximize that space. We can then also put in a row of radishes early season, and then we can actually even save some radish seeds so that in the later summer season, say in mid-August, when we've actually harvested a lot of things out, some kale and other things, that we can then sow in another row of radishes and or spinach for later in the season. So the other part that I would really want you to look at is vertical. As a reminder that by growing in a 715 space, that growing things that grow up, like pole beans, those can actually grow up and not take as much square footage away around the base because they grow up. Things that I would avoid growing is pumpkins. Pumpkins just take up too much space. I wouldn't really grow corn as well because corn, you live in Toronto, corn's going to attract raccoons, and corn is relatively inexpensive and available during the summer season. So those are some tips for you. Also take a look at a book called Square Foot Gardening. It's a really great book as well that will really show you how to plan out your garden in square feet and really how to maximize that as well. Here we go. We got another question from Arlie. I made a new flower bed last year, small. Should I replenish the soil each season? Very clay soil here, but I did put new topsoil last year. Thanks. So putting a little bit of new soil every year, even just putting a bag of manure in that small garden each and every year will add some natural nutrient. So we'll actually improve the health of plants that are there. Clay-based soil is one that, the soil should have sat there. Maybe a little bit of erosion could happen with a little bit of wind and things. If it was sandy-based, sand always surfaces to the top, so you always have to replenish. But you're really checking the quality of soil. I would always amend and put a little bit of new soil in because it is clay-based, though you want to lighten that soil up. So sometimes you want to put a little soil that's a little bit more higher in peat. Gypsum is something that you can actually mix in with some of that soil, and that gypsum will help to break up some of the clay in the bottom. It's just minimal that'll help break up overall. But those are some tips for you. Here we go with another little comment from Faith. Glad you guys had a great holiday. Thank you very much. It was good. It was so good. It was, so what we did, I have to tell you, I took the boys on, which was offered at the resort, an 8-course tasting menu. It was like molecular food that was also supposed to be so flavorful. And they paired it with the boys with some non-alcoholic wines. My boys hated it. Thought it was the worst thing ever. Thought the food size was like, just kind of like, what the heck are they doing? Why is the portion so small? And then we had to order room service after. Too funny. Glad you had a great trip. I'm struggling with water amounts for my seedlings. I find I get original growth, but struggle to get developed seedlings. I just have small jiffy pots and old flower pots. Any tips? So first thing is that, so let's just go through some of the stages of starting. So when we start our seedlings, just give me a second there as well. So talking about, there's the little jiffies that are here. This one here is dried out right now, but you can see that it expands out. So when we're starting our seeds and we're sowing our seed in, first thing we want to generally do is have these all watered beforehand. They're moist, not soaked, but nice and moist. We put our seeds in, and then we'll cover them. So we'll cover them with either a plastic hood, which I have one, but it's going to take me a while to dig it out over there. So we'll cover it with plastic. So we're trying to create that greenhouse effect. If you don't have any plastic, you can just put saran wrap over the top. If you don't have any saran wrap, wet newspaper over the top of where we just sowed those seeds. We're going to wait to see the germination that happens. That's going to maintain moisture for us in there. We don't really have to put too much water because that greenhouse effect happens. But if it does dry out a little bit, we put a little bit of light watering that's down. Next up, when the seeds start to germinate, we leave that hood on until we start to see 2 to 3 leaves emerge. As soon as we see 2 to 3 leaves emerge, we pull that hood off. Then we're trying to put it in a room that's either west or south facing, or you have a grow light to supplement lighting that's in. We're keeping it fairly moist, but allowing the soil to slightly dry out in between while that plant's growing from that 3 to 5 leaf stage into a larger plant. If you're getting those seedlings that are all of a sudden stretching, that means that you don't have enough light or you're growing them too warm in that room. So light is more so the biggest challenge. You can get grow lights that can be very helpful, and they are fairly inexpensive. Sorry, guys. Here's an example of a tabletop grow light. This one here is available from Lowe's. So actually this week on Breakfast Television, I will be talking about growing with light from lights for the grow lights. So that's going to be coming up on BT. That's going to be coming up on Breakfast Television. So those are some of the things that I would recommend for you. That probably may help you through the stages. If you're getting where they're rotting on the stems and just falling over, that's actually a disease. That disease is quite common. And that disease is, what's the name of that one? It's like a mildew. I will remind myself what that disease is, and I will send it on a link on this too. But that's where you get the bottom drop off. It's really hard to control if that happened. If you're getting a bottom rot stem and it falls over, I would replenish that soil and use new seed starting soil overall. So there you go. Here we go. Reply to Paulette. Another question that we have here, guys. Hi, I live in Hillsdale. I have a lot of shade in front of my house, but still would love to have colorful flowers. Anything you suggest? So the best thing for color in shade, that's going to give you, like if it's an annual, it's going to be impatiens. There's nothing that beats impatiens in shade for blocks of color. There's other foliage colors that we can use. So many different hostas that look really good. And we can actually use a blue leaf hosta, put it in with some beautiful little punchy orange or even purple or whatever you like for your impatiens. That really works out. That's great for you as well. Spring flowering bulbs. Generally, the trees don't have any leaves on them. So you'll actually be able to get spring flowering bulbs, generally most shaded places. So you can get a lot of punchy color that are in there. Stilby. So there's a Stilby, which is the beautiful perennial plant. The Stilby Sprite's one of my favorite varieties that can work really well in shade. Solomon Seal is another plant that can give you some interesting texture. So you can use foliage texture and flower to create a really interesting shade garden. Ostrich ferns can give you, even though they're just green, they don't really give you a color, but they're interesting texture that you can play with. But if you're looking for full blocks of like punch out color, annual impatiens. You can plant them in a few containers if you wanted to, or just put a few blocks in that perennial garden. And if you have a larger space and your house is further away from the road, remember the brighter colors you're going to see from a distance, softer colors, especially whites. Whites actually work good in shade. White works really good in shade because it reflects light. But some of those softer colors don't punch out as much. So there you go with that. So on that, guys, we're at about 27 minutes. There's a couple other things that I wanted to get through here. So we talked about the Cottage Life Show. We talked about the White-headed Robin. We talked about seed starting. While we're thinking about travel, still there's that chance with Emerald Cruise Lines where you can join me to go to Floriade. It's a great trip that's going to be happening in July. We start off in Basel, Switzerland, cruise our way up the Rhine River, end off in the Netherlands. And then we go to Floriade, which is the future of green cities and green living and working with plants. So that is something that's still available. There's still some spaces that are available. And there are some cancellation insurance policies that are there too that are COVID related, so that you will have a secured booking. So you don't have to worry about that overall. I'm actually shooting an episode for Cityline tomorrow that'll be airing April the 4th. So quite busy there. This week, I'm continuing to work on the online garden course. The online garden course that I was hoping launching for this spring. I'm not happy because I think it needs more footage of when things are in season. So I think what we're going to be doing is we're going to be actually developing and working on that through the summer season and then launching it next year. Because some people were waiting for information on how to grow their own food this year. And if you're thinking about growing your own food this year, I'm going to be doing what's called a masterclass. So I'll be hopping on exclusively for a group of people for a 1-hour period where we're going to go through some of their individual gardens and we'll be able to help them plan out. Look for information on that. My website will be launching in the next couple of weeks as well. And I thank everybody that joined me here today. So let's see if we have any other things. We got a couple other good mornings too. I always like these two. Good morning from and happy spring from Montreal. We have another question here. When to seed and fertilize? You're going to fertilize your lawn is going to happen when we start to see things actively growing outdoors. You're not going to seed your lawn until we have a soil temperature over 15 degrees Celsius. So that's not going to happen until the middle of May. If not, that seed's just going to sit there dormant. So it's still much too early for that. Here we go. We got another one from Janice. Good morning. We built a greenhouse last year, and this has been our first winter. Can you tell me when is a good time to plant seeds for later planting outside? Jan from Allison. You can start doing that right now. You can start using that greenhouse is called a cold frame. And you can start, there may be the occasional cold night that could happen, but you could put a small heater in there. If the temperature is going to dip at around the freezing mark, if you're down below -5, that's when you may want to consider. but you can start now. Our days are getting much warmer, and just a small block heater even out there with a thermostat on it is always a good thing. Even if you had a little bit of electrical, that's just a safety that will help you in case that temperature drops cooler at night. That heater will come on and just keep that greenhouse warm enough so you're not going to have any damage on the plants themselves. So once again, we're going to end off with one final one, which is happy spring from Penetang. Happy you and the boys had a great holiday. Thank you very much. And once again, spring arriving this morning at 11:33 a.m. So at 11:33, boom, spring's here. The birds are chirping. The joy is there. We have time and we have fun. But I'm excited for spring 2022. Great to be back here again. I hope you guys have a wonderful Sunday overall. And keep smiling. Remember, gardening is always better. Always, 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 always better than therapy, because it makes you feel good. And at the end, it gives you tomatoes. That's why you got to love gardening. Have a great day, guys. Frankie Flowers.